This is not a story where it's going to take incredibly long, so I'll just go through it quite quickly. We were getting blue-balled on ATACMS for quite a while. The Ukrainians have been requesting ATACMS. These are long-range missiles that could be fired from the HIMARS systems that America has provided to Ukraine. And depending on which ATACMS we would give them, it can have varying ranges, which can reach deep into the Russian-occupied territory, dislodging supply lines, hitting command posts, and doing all sorts of damage and causing so much mayhem behind Russian lines. That's why the Ukrainians want it. They want to use it semi-similar to how they're using the Storm Shadow missiles that the United Kingdom has given them already, and they've used to a similar effect, as they're using right now to struck the Sevastopol Black Sea Fleet HQ. They just struck with Storm Shadow. They want to use ATACMS in a similar way. Now, the reason why it wasn't given was, there's two main reasons that I'll boil it down to. There's some few other reasons, but these are the two main reasons. The first reason that we were told was escalation. That if we gave them ATACMS, then there's a scenario where the Ukrainians could fire them into Russia proper, and then once firing them into Russia proper, that could spiral into an escalation, and then as Russia would respond, maybe bombs NATO or, start some conflict somewhere else, and then it could get worse and worse and worse, and the Biden administration wants to avoid escalation. I'm not against avoiding a death spiral, but the longer that Ukraine has had Storm Shadows, the longer they have had already Western provided long-range capabilities, have used it to great effectiveness, and have stayed committed to their promises about where they will use it, leads me to believe that I think we can give it to them confidently. And I am also not as afraid, after all these drone attacks within Russia and all of these attacks within Russia, that even if they were to cross that line, that it would necessarily lead to some death spiral. I'm not saying it's physically impossible, but I don't think that the doomsday profiteers and the doomsday spokespeople, I do think that they're exaggerating what would happen even if that was to pass, which the Ukrainians, from how they've conducted themselves with ATACMS not with ATACMS, but with Storm Shadow so far, they have yet to do anything like that, or indicate that they are going to do something like that. And the Biden administration has already made it clear that they would need a commitment from the Ukrainians not to use the ATACMS in that way if we were to give it to them. So I'm not as concerned about that. And as time has gone on, and we have given them, Abrams, and every time that there's been this new red line in the sand that has been passed, or supposed red line in the sand has been passed, that has been called escalation, it hasn't really led to anything because the Russians don't have much to respond with. There are certain things they can do. They could maybe try cyber attacks or stuff like that. But so far, we have gotten the message, after crossing these things that people called death spirals and horrific instances of escalation, that the Russians, if done in a smart way, where you're not like doing it all at the same exact time and you're prodding them a little bit and you're slowly sliding into it, the Russians don't have much to respond with. They don't really have anything to respond with. That would be an appropriate response, or something that they could do without making the situation worse for themselves. Because the United States has made very clear that they would consider a large-scale cyber attack on the United States very similarly to basically a normal missile strike or bomb attack on the United States. So the Russians are kind of up shit creek when it comes to stopping this supposed escalation. Now, will this change the face of the war? No, wait, I forgot to say the second thing. I'm off my game today. The second reason why it was held back for so long was because we don't have a gigantic stockpile of ATACMS. We don't have just tons and tons of munitions of ATACMS waiting in storehouses that could be shipped all around the world, and we're not going to be running out of anytime soon. That isn't to say we don't have anything in storage. We do. It's just we don't have tons and tons and tons of ATACMS. We do not have it on the same scale that we have, for example, cluster munitions, which we have already provided the Ukrainians. So, what the Biden administration has done, after announcing a few days ago that they weren't going to provide ATACMS, is they've reversed that decision, and now it seems, we're just waiting for official confirmation from the United States, that they're going to provide ATACMS, but they're only going to provide a small amount of ATACMS. Now, how small of an amount? We don't know yet. Whether America would give the exact number, we don't know. And even if they did, We don't know if that number would be like honest or not. Who knows? But we know that they're saying that it's going to be a small number. What the number is, I don't know. Now, what type of impact would a small number of ATACMS missiles have? Well, if Budanyev, which is Ukraine's spy chief, is to be believed, he had a recent interview in DC in his DC hotel room where he was asked about ATACMS and specifically asked about the impact it could have in the war. He said that if the United States was to only give Ukraine like 100 ATACMS, that would have no real large-scale effect on the war. Like, of course, like blowing up one more ship or one more command post is useful, but that type of effect it's going to have is going to be really marginal. And what they really need is a long-term supply of ATACMS to continue this pressure. So it's not just they can throw off a few, but every few days they can hit a bunch of targets and keep up the pressure continuously. So to me, is this going to have a big impact? Potentially. It depends upon if they use these shipments to then try to convince the United States to increase production of ATACMS and then use the ATACMS that they are producing to send them over to Ukraine to support the war effort with a continuous supply line of ATACMS. Then I think that could have a larger scale impact. Dylan saying ATACMS dozens of times. Well, what am I supposed to say? Am I supposed to not say the abbreviation, say the full thing? No. No. I will fumble that hard. This is going to have an impact. Still, though, the Ukrainians obviously want more than just like 10, 20, 30, or even 100 of these. It's going to take a larger, sustainable supply to have a real long-term impact. But this opens the door. The thing that used to not be possible is now very possible, and now it's happening. And this has been the case with every other type of Western supply to Ukraine. Originally, it was, if we send Ukraine any type of weapons, that's a dangerous escalation that the Obama administration can't afford. Then in 2019, thanks to Congress, people give credit to the Trump administration, but it wasn't the Trump administration that wanted to push it through. It was the Trump administration that actually tried to block it and tried to strong-arm Zelensky out of information against his political opponent, Joe Biden, trying to use this for what was already congressionally approved, which is unconstitutional. But it was only 2019 that we started to give them lethal weapons, and we passed that horrific red line of escalation. Those shoulder-mounted munitions, those anti-tank munitions like the Javelins, were then very useful during the defense of Kyiv. Then we started, once the war happened, to send them more of that, which Russia called a horrific escalation. Then we started to send artillery and artillery guns. Horrific escalation, nothing happens. Then we talked about the tanks, how that would be horrific escalation. We send the tanks and nothing happened. Then it was the F-16s. And now we're not only going to train them on the F-16s, but many other Western states are going to send them F-16s, and nothing happened. And now we're going to send them ATACMS, after the United Kingdom has already sent them Storm Shadows. For the Biden administration, it seems that earlier fear that weapon shipments to Ukraine is going to cause a death spiral has slowly faded. That Russia is just not in a strong enough position to afford that type of a confrontation with the United States. If Russia can't even defend its allies that it already has a defensive alliance with, like Armenia, whether it wants to or not, it doesn't have the power to. Its deputy commander was blown up, and they have had basically zero response. They've had multiple soldiers blown up, both during the start of this war. An FSB convoy was shelled, and recently with the recent surge in violence between Azerbaijan and Armenia. If they can't defend their own allies, how are they going to afford that type of confrontation with all of Europe? And so that fear of escalation has slowly faded. And so honestly, even if the Biden administration at this point is saying, okay, fine, we'll give you ATACMS, but only a small amount, I would not be surprised if in another 4 to 5 months, we're going to get something along the lines of, okay, maybe we'll supply you more ATACMS, since we already supplied you some, and it didn't really lead to anything bad. In fact, it led to you blowing up some stuff that was very helpful for the war effort. And then a few months after that, it's going to be, wow, you know, with those more ATACMS, you know, that was quite effective too. Now we're going to give you a long-term supply of ATACMS. We're going to up our domestic production of ATACMS and give them and or sell them to you. Don't be surprised if that happens. But that might also only happen if the Ukraine lobby continues up the pressure. Don't see this as a white flag from Jake Sullivan, okay? Because it isn't. Keep up the pressure.